Hi, good afternoon, everyone. We have a little bit of change in format today compared to previous mental health moments, but welcome and good afternoon to everybody. My name is Charles Latour. I'm one of the behavioral health therapists here at Bellin Health, frequently one of the guests of the program, but today I'm going to be a little less of a guest and more of possibly hosting with Linda out today. And instead, we have three great guests panel that have joined us for today. We have Melanie, Dr. Rodriguez, and our own Mary Lou Cunard, who from previous episodes you've seen as a fairly consistent guest over time. We're always happy when she is able to join us. So before I go any further, I'm going to just talk a little bit about our topic today. It's back to school, right? So I was watching the news the other day and I saw Joanne's Park was getting ready to close. The pool, another park had already announced that by the weekend they would close. Another one in the following week. We have back to school commercials happening left and right, sales ads and so forth. All of these things telling us way too soon, perhaps, that summer's coming to an end. When summer starts coming to an end, we know what that means, that school starting is right around the corner. And to help us talk about this back to school time that we're in, we do have our three guests today. I'm going to ask each of you, if you wouldn't mind, take a moment or two to talk a little bit about your specialty practice areas. Mary Lou, you want to kick us off, and then we'll have Melanie and Dr. Rodriguez join in.
Sure, happy to kick us off. I'm Mary Lou Cunard. I am Director of Outpatient Ambulatory Clinical Services for Bellin Psychiatric Center. I am also a licensed professional counselor, had practiced for many, many years working with children and adolescents in a behavioral health practice. Now I oversee our outpatient team, including our school-based mental health services, and that's how I was fortunate enough to meet Melanie Brick, who is school social worker with De Pere, Unified School District of De Pere. So I'll hand it over to you, Melanie.
Sounds great. I'm entering my 24th year as a school social worker within, obviously, the school setting, previously in Howard Suamico, and for the last 8 years here in De Pere. And I guess my primary role is to support students and remove barriers for students for learning and engagement in school. So it could be mental health, it could be housing, it could be a variety of issues. So my job is to remove those issues as much as possible so that they can come to school and be as productive as possible as well.
Okay, well, hello, good afternoon, everybody. So I am a child and adolescent psychologist, and I've been working now with De Pere, oh my gosh, with Bellin for a little bit over a year. And I work with kids as young as 5, sometimes 4, and parents on how to help with everything from anxiety, getting ready for school, any struggles that they are having in school, and just anything they can come up with that we can provide any support with.
Well, thank you for those introductions. And again, thank you to all three of you being part of this today. Greatly, greatly appreciated. And these sessions are aimed and hopefully targeted at being able to help people joining us in the live session, as well as the sessions that people are able to join in afterwards, a shot of psychological oxygen and well-being to their lives and those of their families. So today we get to do it with the three of you. So thank you again for being here. So we're talking about back to school, right? So it's time, we're getting ready. We have some people that this is, I know in my practice, I'm frequently getting, anytime the topic comes up, how are you getting ready for school? Looking forward to it. I can't wait. Absolutely, I'm counting down the days, and this is different from many years. Typically, it's I'm dreading the days and basically frustrated that the calendar of the summer is going by as quickly as it is. And now people are wanting it to speed up just to get back. Now, that isn't everybody, but that's a lot of the kids that I'm seeing, and it amazes me. But it enthuses me. I think it's pretty cool. They're like, I'm ready to see people. I'm ready to have fun. I'm ready to see kids I haven't seen since summer vacation started. I can't wait to do well this year. I think I've grown and learned and how to study more effectively. So there's a lot of reasons people are excited to go back to school, but we also know that that isn't always the case, and there's frustration or struggles, sometimes even anxiety with the ideas of going back to school, which I hope to get into a little bit. But before we go into that, I'm curious from your experience personally as not only clinicians, but well before that, what are your memories of going back to school, any particular year, any freshman, sophomore, anything that you experienced that was, here's kind of my highlight reel, my favorite personal experience, and my going back and looking at going back to school for me. And Melanie, if we could start with you, that would be great.
Absolutely. I got a big smile over here because I was one of those kids that loved to go back to school. So I'm incredibly social, and that was that was my area. That I loved school and loved my teachers and was very blessed. But I think my greatest memory was going back to school shopping and getting some new outfits. Like, I was the youngest of seven, so it's not like I got like a whole pile of clothes because there were many of us to purchase for. But just those few outfits and being able to wear them for the very first time, like I'd wear them around the house before school started just to be excited about going back to school. So I always think of the back to school shopping trips that probably made my mom pull her hair out, but how colorful and exciting that was for the rest of us. So
I think that's so amazingly great. That idea of I'm gonna go and pick out a few things that I really like. That alone ramps up the excitement and the investment and interest in going back to school. So fantastic. Thank you. Dr. Rodriguez, anything that you can share with us?
See, I was the kid that needed summer to last longer. I did not want to go to back to school. We had uniforms, so there was no cool clothes shopping. My memories but my fondest memories were still the back to school shopping, just like getting the pretty pencils, the pencil case, because it was the entire idea that with a new pencil case, you started a new year and a new you. And it was a great chance to show everybody else, oh, this is how I've changed. This is new, meet new friends. So I think that was the only thing I could highlight about my going back to school, because I was one of those kids that needed summer to last longer. I never wanted to be inside. I just needed to be just outside, not stuck in school. But there comes that positive part of new year.
I love that concept, even. There's a couple things I'd like to chime in on quick before I move to Mary Lou, but the whole idea of the new you, every year is a new you. I mean, we're always transitioning as people day to day, but we don't sometimes realize it. But that summer,
Mhm.
I know so many people, as so many changes, especially not just physically, but emotionally. But the other thing I want to highlight is I love that part about, I have a couple people that I see that the back to school shopping for the clothes is one thing, but my arrangement, the ink pens, the pencils, these things that I'm going to need, there's something really great about that. And people tell me, like, my favorite store is Home Depot or Home Office, Office Depot, and just going shopping for those things can be really fun. So I'm glad to hear that experiences that you have had as well. Mary Lou, round it out for us what you found.
Sure. Well, I was one of those kids like Dr. Rodriguez. I wanted the summer to last forever and didn't want to have to go back to school. And kids like Melanie freaked me out and all the rest of that good stuff. But similar experience. And I'm the oldest of three girls in my family. And my mom took a little different twist on the back to school shopping. She called it Spoil Me Rotten Day. And she would take each one of us on our own back to school trip. And it wasn't really about buying stuff, although we did get to buy the new pencils and the pencil case. And I also wore a school uniform, so not a whole lot of individuality other than socks and shoes. So socks and shoes were how we could express ourselves with our school uniforms. And that's probably the best memory that I take away from back to school was Spoil Me Rotten Day with my mom, which usually involved lunch at a place that we got to pick, and a new pair of shoes and a couple pairs of socks so we could express our individuality with our school uniforms.
That is great. Yeah, I love that. So, so the spoil was, say it again, Spoil Me Rotten Day, was it?
Spoil Me Rotten Day, yep.
Yeah. Well, to be able to look back and say we've had those days, again, a great reflection. So thank you for the three of you for capturing those experiences. I love it. Cool all the way around. So looking a little bit at this notion of returning to school, I'm hearing that we're looking forward to it, but as I said before, a lot of people struggle with it for a lot of different reasons. In your experiences currently, and if you want to bring some history into it, there's some things that stand out as why this is difficult, but in your experiences, what have you found to be the most notable things that make this difficult for the people that you work with? So, Dr. Rodriguez, why don't we start with you on this one?
Of course, I work with a lot of littles, so kids entering 4K, 5K first, and I have a lot of the struggle is, well, they don't want to go to school, right? They want somewhere to last forever, but also the anxiety piece from the parents more than anything of how will my child be received this year? Will they be able to socialize kind of better? Have we been up to date in all the academics so that they can, do they know all the letters, all their numbers? I find that particularly now this year after COVID time, there is a lot more of that anxiety of, are they ready enough? And then will there be behaviors that might make it hard for teachers? So it's more, I'm seeing more of the anxiety on that end, which rightfully so. I understand they want the best for their kids and they want to make sure that they also help the teachers out in that area. So that's what I'm noticing the most. And then getting the kids used to that new routine. I feel their routines have constantly been changing in the past couple of years and been very unpredictable. And we know that with every human being, but especially younger ones, routine is essential to feel safe and stable.
Yeah, no, amazing. Thank you so much for that. But definitely more anxiety. I think COVID has played a role. Maybe we could even talk a little bit more about that. Also, that the difference of routine really impactful to anxiety. We get in a routine during the school year. We kind of get in another routine during the summer. And sometimes it's hard to get out of that one back into a new one for the school year. That in and of itself can have a great deal of stress to it. So, Mary Lou, for you, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to ask you to do two things with this. From a personal standpoint, because I know you have two amazing children who were great in their academic years, both athletically and academically. What did you see from a personal standpoint of this time of year, and then clinically some of your experiences as well?
Yeah, I have two very different kids. I have my academic kid who couldn't wait to go back to school, and my athlete who didn't want her softball season ever to end, and going back to school meant softball ended. And so, both unique in their ways of how they needed to kind of wrap their head around transitioning back to school. And I think this time of year, the transition back to school is just that. Change can be hard. Change in routine, like Dr. Rodriguez talked about, just transition, all of that it can be exciting, but it can also be anxiety provoking. And Charles, you and I have talked plenty of times here on the Mental Health Moments about how our brains are wired, and we're wired for danger. We're wired to look for the things that are different and scary, and sometimes that takes over for kids. For my son, he couldn't wait to get back to school and dive into more books and learn more. And for my daughter, it was drag her off the dirt and hose her off and send her off to school. And there was a little anxiety that came with that for her as well.
That's amazing. Yeah. So then clinically, what have you seen over the years?
I'd say clinically over the years, each of those transitions can be challenging for kids. Dr. Rodriguez talked about the littles that are going to school for the first time, not knowing what to expect, and some of the anxiety that pours off of us as parents or caregivers when we're nervous as well for our kids. And then each of those milestones. So first day of kindergarten, and then we move into middle school, and then high school brings on a whole nother set of anxiety, and then graduation, and what do I do now? Am I ready for college, or all my friends are going to a 4-year and I don't know what I want to do? Each of those transitions, I think, are challenging, even for our older kids. And it's important, I think, not to ignore that. I think we focus a lot on the littles that are entering school for the first time and may not always be able to speak up for themselves or name what their emotions may be. But those bigger kids, our teens and preteens, are sometimes struggling just as much. COVID threw us a curveball, and as Dr. Rodriguez alluded to, there's a lot of that. That's in play now as well, for students and parents and caregivers alike, teachers too.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's just, we still see lingering effects of COVID. In fact, I'm still working with a couple people who have elected to stay online, and that going back was not an option. And for reasons of bullying and so forth and in-school anxiety, maybe we could come back and touch on that a little bit as well. So thank you, Mary Lou. Melanie, you want to wrap this section up for us? As a school social worker, I'm particularly curious about some of what you've seen and experienced, and how your work has been involved in this area.
I just wanted to piggyback on what you just said about some patients not returning back to the office, because we have some students who discovered that during COVID that they're better online learners, and that helped their anxiety. So we have some that have stayed with like a virtual platform, like an alternative school, a K-12 school, through like not a homeschooling, but like a virtual schooling. So they flourished in that, and others really struggled with that. So we kind of heard both sides. So that's been unique, a unique experience, because they wouldn't have otherwise had that if it wasn't for COVID to even try that. Probably we would have just been forcing them to kind of do the regular school day, which wasn't working for them either. I think as far as schools, like, we know this is a tricky time for a lot of kids that have some challenges, and transitions are hard. So we just want to create safe spaces in our school, and encourage kids to talk. Like, we're going to listen more and talk less, to kind of tune in and dial in what they need. And our job is to work with the families to decrease the stress about the kids coming to school, to keep them at school, because that routine and establishing that routine is so important in the first few weeks, because once they get in the groove, hopefully it will get easier in time. But if we are missing a day here and missing a day there, and 2 days, 3 days a week, it gets really hard to create like some continuity and to build those relationships with our students that we feel are so critical to helping them succeed in school. So I also think that parent anxiety is a lot of it. So if we model them how to work through those anxious moments for our children, that they will learn to work through those anxious moments too, not to flee from them, but to embrace them and talk about your feelings, and keep an open dialogue about that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Melanie. I was reading this article as we were getting ready for this program, and one of the top 10 tips, and they all seem to be around establishing routines, so on and so forth. But one of them was, parents, always take your own temperature. Where are you around your child returning to school, comparatively speaking to where they are? They may even be more comfortable with the return than you are. And one metaphor or example I've always seen that was helpful in this is your kids growing up, the first sign of blood, like a little cut on their hand or whatever. and the parent and the kid's looking, Mom, something happened, or Dad, something happened. And the parent, depending on the reaction, is, oh my God, we got to get you to the hospital. It's all of a sudden the child who was not really all that worried about it, now all of a sudden their emotional response is completely different and much more in line with that exaggerated, perhaps, response of the parent. So sometimes as parents, I think we really need to take our own temperature of where we're at, what we're modeling, how we're supporting without pressure, but supporting in an encouraging way, and asking questions that are helpful to them of how they're going to get through it. So thank you for that, all of you, greatly appreciated. Looking ahead, and I think you leaned into some of these already, but I want to dive a little bit more deeply into the psychology of this. What are some of the psychological factors that you have seen in your experiences that can impact this return and transition both favorably, sometimes maybe not so favorably? And Dr. Rodriguez, you could kick us off on this one.
Sure. A lot of it is environmental. Everything from what you just talked about, the reaction of the parents, or the parents stressed, or the parents worried. I have a lot of parents that ask me, should we tell the school the problems he had last year, or we just wait and see? So kids are hearing this, right? As much as we think we're keeping it away from them, my mom used to say I had a satellite antenna where I could hear everything that was going on in the house, even though they tried not to. So kids hear this. So not just the parents' own anxiety, but things they're hearing on the news, on the commercials, what other kids are saying about returning to school if they have older siblings. Oh, this grade is so hard. So there's a couple of things that really just impact what they already feel is going to be like. And that makes it harder because they're already a little bit nervous about it. I think what's been helping is a lot of teachers and schools have been opening up the classrooms earlier, like letting kids at all ages visit the classrooms, meet the teachers. If there's a child with a particular need, whether it be behavioral, emotional, academic, being able to at least check in on those prior so that it reduces the anxiety, which we know for kids, and even for adults, it really impacts their day-to-day. It impacts their behavior, how much they're able to pay attention to participate. So I've noticed that a lot. I noticed parents reaching out to the schools and asking for things like that, or at least I've had teachers that have video chat with students in the middle of their own summer, which again, teachers going above and beyond has been amazing. And I noticed that helping, but a big chunk of it is environmental and their previous experiences with school. If there's been a lot of bullying, a lot of them hold to that. Will I be in the same classroom with this kid, or will they be my friend this year or not? And that's just the younger ones. Like it was talked about for adolescents. Yes. Am I expected to know what my life is supposed to look like? And I'm just starting high school, or I'm heading into my 11th or 12th, my senior year, and I need to make a big life choice. Talking to them about that not necessarily your choices now are going to be the rest of your life, but it is a good idea to start thinking about it, but providing support as we do. Because a lot of them get very nervous of is this my final decision for the rest of my life? And the reality is, even if they choose a college, they can change majors.
Yeah, I mean, there's such great wisdom in there. You hit so many unbelievably great things. One that I want to double click on, I'd love to do with all of them, but just this week, I was talking with somebody that I'm not going to see before he goes back to school. And we were talking about so his self-rating of anxiety was like on a scale of 1 to 10, it was 20, the way he started off the session. And we were talking, I'm like, so what are the ingredients? Why is this so high? What are you so worried about? And he said, I can't see myself in college right now. And I'm like, but you're going into your senior year, not your freshman year of college, right? So it was scaling all of that down from I can't see how I would be next year to we don't have to worry about next year. We have to worry about next week or the week after that, and how we are and what we can do to get through that, and then developed a plan of how that was going to happen. But the what ifs of where we go, what if I'm not ready for this in college? What if I'm not? Okay, scaling it back and helping with that. So yeah, that idea that where we are, sometimes we take it so far past there, and that in and of itself is so anxiety provoking. So thank you for all of that. Melanie, let's kick over to you.
I had so many thoughts while you were talking. I was like, oh, yes, yes, yes. Yes, we want to know about students who had concerns last year because we can kind of meet them where they're at and give them what they need to be more successful for this year. So I think parents are always like, oh, do we tell them that we got kicked out of the? Yes, please let us know. Like we don't hold it against all kids have a fresh start with us. And every day, every year, it's a fresh start. So, and we do want that open relationship with therapists too. And we encourage releases so that we can partner and collaborate to create a more successful like outcome for the kids. So like if we're doing things and working in conjunction with each other, that's very helpful for us at school. And we want to know what you're working on in therapy if the family is open to that, just so we can support that too. And we can create safe environments for them in our setting as well. So and then when you were also talking about like teachers coming in, I've come in multiple times over summer and help kids practice that locker combination. That seems to be like a huge source of stress as kids transition from lockers with no combinations to lockers with combinations. So it's walking their schedule, learning the building, practicing their locker, just like knowing what the schedule looks like and setting up some of those expectations. So kind of going through those routines to help it be better for them and that transition to be a little less stressful, and like showing them where my office is. And I also have candy and I also have a comfy chair and my office is a safe place for kids, but just taking the time to help support them and meet them where they're at. We do see a lot of environmental issues. We do see the bullying and the peer relations having a huge impact on kids and their excitement about transitioning back to school or not. So we also see a lot of that as well.
Yeah, the bullying part to me is really one of the things that creates some of the most angst about returning. That I don't want to go back to that. I feel like I had a reprieve over the summer, at least as much as I could. That happened in person because there's also the online cyber type of stuff that goes on in social media. But again, those environmental factors greatly impact this. One other thing you made me think of, Melanie, that I see a lot of is the big transition seems to be 8th grade to 9th grade, especially if their 8th grade middle school environment was relatively small. Now I'm going to this massive school. What you were saying of helping visualize, get a walk through something that will help you see this thing that you now think of as so daunting. Any experience of comfort with that can lower that stress and anxiety about what they're seeing it as, and can make it much more maybe not easy but less daunting by the time they walk in that first day of school. So
Yes,
thank you for that as
I
well.
wanted to add that at De Pere High School on the very first day of school, September 1st, it's only 9th graders. We don't invite any other grade levels in the building. So they get the building all to themselves to walk their schedules, to do nest and team building kinds of activities, but just to create more comfort in this building without all the upperclassmen, so that they can feel more confident and comfortable a little bit at least with how that next day will go when everyone's there.
And the people that I've seen that have experienced that, the world of difference that that makes cannot be stated clearly enough. It's unbelievable. So I think a great strategy. So Mary Lou, rounding out the clinical look at this, what are some of the clinical experiences you've seen and helped with over time?
Yeah, I think it's all been touched on as we've talked a little bit about it, and certainly it is, it's change and transition, and that evokes a lot of emotion, lots of different kinds of emotions for parents, kids, and teachers. And as I listen to the discussion and hear some of the the feedback from both Dr. Rodriguez and Melanie, it really is amazing what our schools offer. And if you are a parent or caregiver out there wondering how to help your kid, The schools do that. You know, each school that I have had contact with, and through Bellin, we have 11 school-based mental health programs going on. They all have social workers like Melanie that are working above and beyond what you would expect during the summertime hours. They're opening the doors, they're welcoming kids and families in, whether it's a new school or whether you're returning school, and that's absolutely amazing. You know your kids best. You know those kids that you take care of, be it your grandchildren or your nieces or nephews. If they seem nervous, it's important to ask them about that. And the way you gauge how you react to that is so very important. If you know that they're anxious and nervous, your calm presence will mean the world to them, and being just open and accepting to what they're worrying about. Add to it what you just alluded to, Charles, and touched on, and that is kind of the whole social media aspect of going back to school and the new year, new me, and how that can get derailed, especially for our older kids going back to school. How are my peers going to react to me? I have a new haircut. I have different clothes this year. I've got a bunch of zits all over my face, or I finally cleared my face up, and I hope that people will actually see me. All of those other pressures that go with that, and social media that plays into that as well, can be really challenging for our kids. So as adults and caregivers, our reaction to that and the way that we can help our kids navigate through that is really, really key.
Yeah, that curated life of social media. Here's what I'm going to let the world know about me, and then let them decide in a binary way if it's I'm liked or not liked. Wasn't a factor when I was going back to school in any summer to fall, but certainly part and parcel, without a doubt, to the experience now. So I want to do one more thing, and as we go into this last question, certainly want to invite anybody online with us. If you have any questions for our three guests, please fire away. Anything you want to ask them, that's what we're here for. So as we wait for any questions that people may have, rounding out before we start wrapping up, what are some, if you had, here's my go-to strategy. I'm always asked this question. Sometimes it's, I think, people looking for that one go-to thing, or the quote unquote tips and tricks. What are some tips and tricks that can be most helpful to me and my family? Any of that you have as a go-to that you would recommend for families listening in? Let's start with Melanie, if you wouldn't mind.
Tips and tricks. I got all kinds of them. No, I'm just kidding.
I thought so.
You know, and I think part of reducing anxiety, like we welcome kids back to school here and they pick up their school supplies. So any students who are in need, I think just getting them in the building, while it might be at the high school and not at their building, but getting them the tools that they need to be ready for the school year also reduces stress when they feel like they're ready and they have what they need. We hand out school supplies, we hand out clothing, we hand out, you know, anything they could possibly need almost here, and more, gym shoes and whatnot, here at school. But I think just helping them to mentally feel ready for school makes a difference when they know that they have all the items on their supply list and they're entering day one and they at least feel prepared. That sets them up well for a good start to the year, even if they are really nervous, even if they are really anxious. But we always try to support in the classrooms as much as we can, especially with kids. We have the criers who don't want to come into school, and we meet them at the car and with a friendly smile on face, and we just keep going back to them, you know, for a week or two, just to check in on them and how they're doing, and letting them know, like, hey, we're your person, you know, I'm your person, we're your people, and we care about you and how you're transitioning. And usually within a week or two, or sometimes even less, a few days, they're okay. Like, they're okay. And letting parents know they're okay. We sneak a call to them and say, like, just, you know, play it down. We got this. It's going to be okay. So calming parents a lot in the beginning, especially if they have a crying child who doesn't want to get out of their car. That is a huge, so calming them is a huge trick. You like, if we can make that happen, we're in good shape. So.
Thank you for that. Great stuff. I think the whole idea of the calming quality. One thing that I'd like to tap into that you had identified is, we know uncertainty is one of the great facilitators of anxiety. The avenue you were going down in the tips and trick department, to making sure they have all the certainty of what they need, creating certainty in the midst of uncertainty of what's going to happen is so helpful in dialing down what anxiety and stress might be there. So greatly helpful. So thank you. Dr. Rodriguez, any tips and tricks that you would like to highlight?
Okay, I made notes for myself because if not, I was gonna forget as I kept hearing Melanie speak. So one of the things that Melanie did talked about is to, walk them through to what's expected, their classes, their schedule, their teachers, anything that they can already know ahead of time is going to be a big deal for them. Even if they roll their eyes and they say, "Oh, it's fine," they're listening to you. They get that you have them prepared, but not in an anxious way. So the same thing with a calming. How can we make the start of school exciting? How can we make it a positive thing? Focusing on those positives without invalidating their own anxiety of it. So if they are talking about, "I'm nervous," or if you notice them being nervous or more irritated when preparing their school backpack or talking to their friends about school. So really just checking in with them how they feel and not just saying everything will be all right, but listening.
Yeah.
And maybe bringing in, parents can bring in their own experience or older siblings experience or family friends experience, and letting them know that you hear them and that this is a transition and it's can be uncomfortable, even if it's in the same school with the same teacher and the same peers. It's always a little bit harder and they need support with that. So I would say validating and preparing them, walking them through their schedule. And then last thing, almost like transitional objects. So for little ones and even adolescents, when they know that the caregiver cares enough to leave a note, even if they're embarrassed by the note and they'll hide it, they have the note. They saw that the parent said, "Hey, do your best. You got this." For little ones, a picture of something they did in the summer, a drawing, a nice letter, especially if we have those criers or they don't want to separate from mom or dad, being able to say, "Oh, you have a letter from mom or dad." That can all create just a positive experience and something that for some can be just a lot of levels of anxiety and a lot of insecurity in that area.
So much great in there as well. Thank you so much for that. Mary Lou, you want to wrap this part up before we see if we have any questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we're talking about here is really just preparation, right? Preparing and working to get back into the school and back to the school routine. So, I with my kids, it always was, what can we do to start to build in and build back some routines? Getting a little closer to bedtime. That's going to be school bedtime. Making sure we've reconnected with friends that we know we're going to interact with at school. And when my kids were younger, that meant setting up play dates for kids maybe that they hadn't seen, that we knew were going to be in school with them. We talked about it already, a back to school visit and making sure that you get to that orientation day or that back to school visit. And Dr. Rodriguez, as you were talking a little bit about that note that is so important for a caregiver to leave for a kid. Even as my daughter launched herself off to Italy in a semester during college, I made her take a back to school picture, which happened to have some beautiful mountains behind her off her balcony at her apartment in Italy. I wanted a back to school picture of her, part of our routine. And every morning I texted her a message, just giving her some good vibes. So even the big kids like to know that their parents, their loved ones are reaching out to them. That is so important when they disconnect and have to launch into school and back into that routine.
Thank you for that, Mary Lou. And tying back in something Dr. Rodriguez has said as well, just as we start to wrap up, I don't see any questions. Maureen, if there's any, you could highlight them for us. But as we're waiting to hear, want to comment on two things, and then I'd love to get a comment, a final thought from each of you on this topic. But the idea that being able to see what's going to happen. Mary Lou, you used the word prepared, being as prepared as can be. Dr. Rodriguez, the message, something that we give to our child when they go to school. The number of people that I've seen over the years who have found in their lunch bag or box, whatever they have, this little message. And my heart, this might even be hard to say, but my heart goes out to some of these kids who experience this. But the kids who eat lunch all by themselves, and that's the most stressful part of them returning to school. Those who have that message that in the midst of what's around me, I still have this to hold on to. It means everything to them. And we can never underestimate those sometimes what seem like the littlest things that we can do are the biggest things that can get them through the most difficult times of a day, and with love and the caring that we have, parents, caregivers, and so forth. So thank you for those, all three of you. Final thoughts that either of you have before I do a quick wrap up and suggestion.
I was just going to say that those little things like notes, like validation, they don't cost us money, at least. So we know that, there are some families that have more resources than others, and that's the reality. So when it comes to back to school shopping, sure, they can't buy the brand names or when I was younger, it was the Hello Kitty pencils. And so they might not be able to do that, but being able to do one special thing, being able to make this experience as hopeful as possible, can be a note, can be a letter, can be a drawing, a picture, a conversation. Those are things that kids, no matter the age, will carry on. And then later as adults, we'll sit back and think, you know what, this was meaningful. This helped me with my kids, or this helped me get through those days. And a lot of them don't have to be expensive.
Absolutely. As most of those things actually are, the cost is our time and our love, which isn't a cost. It's what we do, our connecting. So Melanie, anything from you before we wrap up? Final thoughts?
Yep, I would just say lean into the kids, listen more, talk less, and that doesn't cost any money either. So we tend to overtalk, I think, with our kids sometimes. And I think just listening and letting them share and talk about their day and the ups and the downs, and not trying to problem solve it, but just letting it be, and just letting them, not trying to fix things for the kids, and like working through the struggles and letting them process and work through it is also super powerful and teaches the kids a lot of coping strategies. So we're there to support and listen, but we don't have to fix it all and hover and fix that. So, and I have goosebumps for the lady that said, it was Pam Lund, encourage your child to be the one that doesn't let anyone eat alone. I love that. So thank you, Pam. Awesome.
That is beautiful. Mary Lou?
Absolutely. We've talked a lot about kids and how anxiety provoking and stressful back to school can be for kids, but it's important for us to take care of ourselves as well. Our kiddos take their guidance from us. They read us as their parents and caregivers. So I would encourage everyone, and it's amazing how many people we have on the call today. I'm assuming you're listening because you've got kids and you want to make sure that transition back to school is smooth for them. Be sure you're taking care of yourself too. Be sure you're taking time for yourself, that you're aware of how the transition is affecting you, so you can be there and help your child problem solve and help them ease back into school in a way that'll be positive for all of you.
Thank you, Mary Lou. I'm just going to wrap up with one book recommendation for people maybe to consider, possibly a second one. There's one that I love. It's called Under Pressure. And the second one, Clearer, Closer, Better. And if you can't see that, Maureen can sometimes type it in. The author is Emily Balchatis, and she's a professor at NYU. She studies motivation and goal setting through the lens of visual. And one of her strategies through her research is understanding what our strategies are and setting goals, but understanding what might get in the way of them. And she studied these starting with Olympic athletes, and then found this story about Michael Phelps, who was going for a gold medal. And at one time, the one he would have got the gold medal on, which would have set his record, his goggles flew off on a turn and he would have lost, but his training kicked in, which was He had planned for this, exactly what he needed to do to still get to where he needed to. And they have found that one of the missing ingredients to reaching the goals that we have in life is being able to identify an obstacle to it and what you would do if that showed up. So whatever we could do, what I have found over the years is sometimes the teenagers and younger that we see have that one fear that they have, that if they could understand that if this happens, the strategy that they're going to have to address it gives them the confidence to go after what they want to be able to do rather than fall prey to that. So it's unbelievable in terms of being able to overcome that which seems daunting to us, like our first day back to school after summer vacation. So I hope everybody got a little bit out of this to be able to make this difficult time potentially even unbearable for some people, not only bearable, but hopefully an exciting time, and be able to transition the mentality or mindset from anxious to excitement. And we got some things from our three great guests today to help be able to do that, and massive shots of psychological oxygen from the three of you. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, and a great rest of your day to everybody else. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.